When we talk about avoidance, most people assume they disappear because they don't care. But that's not true. They run because control is their oxygen. Their distance is not about you. It's about them needing to feel like they are steering their own ship, that no one has the power to dictate their emotions. And the greatest illusion an avoidant builds is this: as long as I hold the steering wheel, I'm safe. Now here's the paradox. Control doesn't equal peace. Control equals confinement. Think about it. What happens to a person who spends their entire life running from intimacy just to protect themselves? They become a prisoner of their own escape route. And here's where the turning point begins. The moment you stop chasing, you shatter their illusion of control. Because control only exists when there's someone on the other end reacting to it. Let me give you an example. If an avoidant pulls back and you chase, they feel powerful. They get to dictate the rhythm. But if they pull back and you stay still, if you don't run after them, don't beg for answers, don't plead for closeness, suddenly they're not controlling the rhythm anymore. You are. And that loss of control doesn't just irritate them. It terrifies them because it introduces something they hate but can't resist: curiosity. Curiosity is dangerous to an avoidant. Why? Because curiosity is the beginning of engagement. It's the seed of connection. It forces the mind to dwell on the very thing it tried to escape. When you go silent, you become the unanswered question in their psychology. You are no longer predictable, and unpredictability is like an itch they can't scratch. See, human beings are wired for certainty. We want to know where things stand. And avoidance, as much as they pretend otherwise, crave certainty even more because it makes them feel safe. But the second you disrupt the pattern, when you remove yourself from the chase, you become the one thing they cannot categorize, and that unsettles their nervous system. They start thinking, wait, why aren't they running after me? Why aren't they begging for me back? What does this mean? Did I misjudge them? Have they already moved on? Notice what just happened. Their brain shifted from certainty to questions, from control to curiosity, and curiosity is far more powerful than fear, because fear pushes people away, but curiosity pulls them in. Now, don't misunderstand me here. You're not playing games. This isn't manipulation. It's simply the reality of what happens when you reclaim your power. You're no longer feeding the avoidance illusion. You're forcing them to sit in the unknown. And the unknown, ironically, is what finally begins to dismantle their walls. This is why so many of you who've gone no contact notice something strange after a while. At first, the avoidant seems relieved, like your silence gave them exactly what they wanted: space. But then, slowly, something starts to shift. They begin orbiting again. A text out of nowhere, a like on your post, a random call just to check in. Why? Because the silence has turned into a magnet. They thought control would give them freedom, but all it gave them was emptiness. Here's what you must understand. Avoidants don't come back because you begged, or because you chased, or because you convinced them of your worth. They come back because your silence stripped them of control and replaced it with curiosity. And curiosity is relentless. It wakes them up at night. It follows them into their workday. It lingers in their subconscious. It gnaws at the walls they built around themselves. And sooner or later, that curiosity overrides their fear. They realize the only way to quiet the noise in their mind is to return to the very source they tried to escape. That's you. So the next time you find yourself tempted to chase, to explain, to prove, remember this truth: the power is not in pursuit. It's in presence. It's in having the strength to withhold reaction, to let silence do the heavy lifting. Because silence doesn't just create distance. Silence creates mystery. And mystery is the one thing stronger than their need for control. Never forget that. Control may push them away, but curiosity will always pull them back. When an avoidant leaves, they convince themselves it's clean. They tell themselves they've cut the cord, that they've escaped without consequence. But here's the reality no one talks about. Every relationship leaves behind an emotional debt. And debt doesn't disappear just because you walk away. It waits. It grows interest. It demands to be paid. Think about it. Every conversation that ended halfway, every promise left unfulfilled, every glance, every touch, every unspoken word, those things don't just vanish. They stay in the subconscious like unpaid bills piling up on a desk. And the avoidant, no matter how cold they seem, knows on some level those bills exist. They may not want to acknowledge it, but the debt keeps tugging at them in quiet moments. This is why avoidance never truly feels like freedom. You'll hear them say, "I just needed space." But what they're really saying is, "I wanted to escape the weight of connection." And for a while, that feels liberating. But the longer they're gone, the more the emotional debt starts creeping back in. The silence they wanted so badly becomes an echo chamber. And in that silence, their mind starts whispering, "What about the way they looked at you? What about the things you left unsaid? What about the part of you that felt alive when you were with them?" The debt can take many forms. For some, it shows up as guilt. For others, it's nostalgia. Sometimes it's pure longing. But no matter how it manifests, the principle is always the same. You cannot outrun what is unfinished. The avoidant believes that distance erases, but distance actually magnifies. It sharpens the contrast between what they had and what they lost. Here's the key. Emotional debt doesn't just pull them back toward you. It forces them into a confrontation with themselves. Because when they left, they thought they were leaving you behind. What they didn't realize is that they were leaving behind pieces of themselves. The version of them that felt safe with you. The version of them that felt seen. The version of them that touched intimacy and ran because it scared them. Those pieces don't die just because they walked away. They remain demanding attention. And over time, that demand becomes unbearable. Why? Because human beings are wired for completion. Our brains crave closure. It's the reason an unfinished song haunts you, the reason an unresolved conflict eats at your mind. Psychologists call it the Zeigarnik effect, the tendency to remember incomplete tasks more than completed ones. An avoidant relationship is one big, unfinished task. It lingers. It pulls at them in ways they can't suppress. This is why so many of you have experienced the boomerang effect. Out of nowhere, months later, you hear from them. Not because they suddenly found courage, not because they figured everything out, but because the debt came knocking and ignoring it became harder than facing it. Now here's where it gets powerful. You cannot pay their debt for them. That's the mistake most people make. They try to reopen communication, chase after closure, or smooth over the rough edges. But all that does is delay the process. An avoidant must feel the weight of their own unfinished business. They must wrestle with it in silence until the pull becomes stronger than their fear. And let me be clear, their return is not always about romance. Sometimes it's about validation. Sometimes it's about testing whether the door is still open. But make no mistake, the fact that they return at all proves the principle: emotional debt cannot be escaped. It demands repayment. And repayment requires reconnection, even if just for a moment. This is where your power lies. Because the less you interfere, the heavier the debt becomes for them. Your absence forces them to sit in the discomfort of their own choices. Your silence amplifies the reality that the weight is theirs to carry. And when they finally reach the point where the weight is unbearable, they will come back, not out of pity, not out of convenience, but because the human mind cannot leave something unfinished forever. So the next time you ask yourself, why did they come back? Remember this: it wasn't your pleading, your effort, or your endless patience. It was the weight of the debt they created when they left. It was the pull of unresolved connection, the haunting silence of unfinished love. That's what brought them back. And here's the truth you must hold on to. Emotional debt doesn't just call them back to you, it calls them back to themselves. Because when they face you again, They're not just facing a person they once loved. They're facing the part of themselves they tried to abandon. And that confrontation is what finally cracks the armor. So never forget this: the heart can lie, the mind can rationalize, but the soul always knows when something is unfinished.